So today we're going to go over verb tenses, and I'm going to take the verb tenses from the Rules for Writers book by Diana Hacker and Nancy Sommers. So, 8th edition. So today we're going to go over how do we use verb tenses. How many verb tenses are there in English? What do those tenses look like? What are the functions of these verb tenses? And so the answers to all of these questions are all going to be answered in this video as I go over how to use verb tenses in your writing. And so first you have the simple tense, the simple present. So the simple present is something that's happening right now. I walk, I ride, I am. Then the simple past, something that happened yesterday. I walked, I rode, I had fun. And then the perfect tenses. More complex time relationships are indicated by perfect tenses. A verb in one of the perfect tenses has have plus a past participle. And in the perfect tense, you always express an action that was or will be completed at a time of another action. So when you have the simple tenses like simple past, simple present, simple past, and simple future, here you have the simple present, something that's happening now, a completed action now. Simple past, a completed action that happened yesterday. Simple future, a completed action that will happen tomorrow. So if I say, right now, I lecture grammar. Yesterday, I lectured grammar. And tomorrow, I will lecture grammar. So here, I lecture grammar, but as one completed action at 3 different times. Then you have the perfect tenses. When you have the perfect tenses, you have 2 actions going on at the same time. And the perfect action, the perfect tense, is always the action that happens first. So here you would say, I have lived, that's present perfect, I have lived in Los Angeles. So that happened first. I moved to Los Angeles, and then 35 years, for 35 years. So that's 2 actions. You have 2 actions, and the perfect tense is always the action that happens first. Past perfect. I had brushed my teeth before I went to bed. So here, the past perfect, which is had brushed, it's have plus a past participle. So the perfect tense is, the past perfect tense happens before another action in the past. So I had brushed my teeth before I went to bed yesterday. So yesterday I had brushed my teeth before I went to bed. So which action happened first? I brushed my teeth first. So that's the past perfect, had brushed. Then I went to bed. Future perfect. Future perfect means you're going to have 2 future actions in the future. So tomorrow I will have brushed my teeth before I will have gone to bed. Therefore, you have 2 actions in the future, and the action in the future that happens first, that's the perfect tense. The perfect tense is always the action that happens first before another action, either in the present, the past, or the future. The progressive tenses, present progressive, I am talking. That means that I am in the process of talking and talking and talking and not stopping. So it's not a complete action. So if you have an action that's not complete, that's happening right now, that's known as the present progressive. Right now you are listening to this video. So that is present progressive. Past progressive. Yesterday at the same time, I was lecturing on this video. So here you have an action that's not complete and it's happening in the past. Future perfect means you have an action that's not complete and happening in the future. Tomorrow I will be lecturing on this video. So the progressive tense just simply means that you have an action that's not complete happening either right now, in the past, or in the future. And then the 3 perfect progressive tenses means that you have one action that's happening first, but it's continuing to happen. So one continuous action happening first before another action that's sometimes complete or not complete. So if I would say, I have been talking for about an hour before the phone rang, or before Robert walked in the door. So here you have two actions happening right now, and then you have one action. Always the action that comes first is the progressive tense, the perfect progressive tense. So the perfect tenses, remember, all of the perfect tenses is have plus a verb. And so every kind of every kind of perfect tense always is the action that happens first. And so in the present perfect progressive, you have one continuous action that happens first before another action happens. I have been walking down the street when I saw two cars crash into each other. So that means I'm still walking down the street right now, and then I see the two cars crash into each other. Or I have been talking on this, and I'm still talking, and then a student interrupts as I'm talking. So basically, the two actions, the first action is still going on when another action hits. So that is, and it's happening right now. And so as I am speaking, I have been speaking for an hour, and the car alarms outside are ringing at the same time. And so as a result, when students listen to the video, they're going to hear me talking, and they're going to hear car alarms at the same time, because while I was still talking, and then the car alarms rang. Now, how is this different from present progressive? If I say, while I am talking, the car alarms rang. Well, that's because if I use the present progressive, the present perfect progressive, it puts more emphasis on the fact that this is the first action that happens first before another action. That's the only difference. It doesn't have that much difference in meaning. It's just a nuance and an emphasis that any of the perfect tenses always happen first before another action. So as a writer, if you want to put emphasis on the fact that that it's important for the reader to realize that this happened first, you would use a perfect tense. If it doesn't matter that one action happened before the other in importance, then you use the progressive tenses. Because when you put the progressive tenses, each event has the same significance. So while I was walking, the dog barks. So each of these events have equal significance. If I said, I have been walking when the dog barked, then so much emphasis on the fact that I have been walking, that happened first, and then the dog barked. So basically, when you use the perfect tenses, whether you use the perfect tense or the perfect progressive tense, you're putting more emphasis on what happens first. And then past progressive, yesterday at this time, I had been talking when the phone rang, and tomorrow when I will have been talking, then the phone will ring. So that the present progressive is one incomplete action that happens first, and then another action. Then the past progressive is one incomplete action that happened yesterday, and then something else happened. And then the future perfect tense is when you have something that will happen in the future, but it's incomplete before another future action will happen. And these different tenses are very confusing for students, especially Chinese students, because in Chinese, you only have three tenses. You only have the simple, present, and past. So if I were to give an example in Chinese, you would say, yesterday, I go to the store. So that means it happened yesterday. Today, I go to the store, which means I'm going to the store today. So that would be present tense. Tomorrow, I go to the store. So the only marker of time would be yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and right now. So then you just have those 3 time zones: now, yesterday, and tomorrow. And then everything else, that's it. So for a Chinese student, having to memorize 12 different tenses is extremely confusing. And so that's why if you're a teacher, you have to take into account the different languages that your students speak, and then try to teach the student based on what kind of language they had before. So special uses. So now I'm going to go, now that I've gone over the different tenses and how they look, now I'm going to go over each tense separately. So how do we use the simple present? Special uses of the simple present. So simple present means I talk, I see, I run. So use the simple present when expressing general truths, like the sun rises every day to the west. When writing about literature and when quoting, summarizing, or paraphrasing authors' views. General truths or scientific principles should appear in the present tense unless such principles have been disproved. Galileo taught that the earth revolves around the sun. When writing about a work of literature, you may be tempted to use the past tense. The convention, however, is to describe fictional events in the present tense. So in the play Romeo and Juliet, Romeo falls in love with Juliet. So they use the present tense. In Musuge's Abuse's Black Rain, a child reaches for a pomegranate in his mother's garden, and a moment later he is dead, killed by the blast of an atomic bomb. When you are quoting or summarizing or paraphrasing the author of a non-literary work, use present tense verbs such as writes, reports, asserts, and so on to introduce the source. This convention is followed usually when the author is dead. And so Dr. Groupman argues that doctors are susceptible to the subtle and not so subtle efforts of the pharmaceutical industry to sculpt our thinking. So when you are documenting a paper with APA-style in-text citation, use past tense verbs such as reported or demonstrated, or present perfect verbs such as has reported or has demonstrated to introduce the source. So you would say that E. Wilson reported that positive reinforcement alone was a less effective teaching technique than a mixture of positive reinforcement. The past perfect tense. So the past perfect tense is used when one past action happens before another past action. The past perfect tense, like I had brushed my teeth before I went to bed. So the past perfect tense consists of a past participle preceded by had, like had worked, had gone. This tense is used for an action already completed by the time another past action is about to start. So everyone had spoken by the time I arrived. I pleaded my case, but Paula had made up her mind. Writers sometimes use the simple past tense when they should use the past perfect. When you use the past perfect, it places the past action more into the past than the simple past. We built our cabin high on a pine knoll 40 feet above an abandoned quarry that had been flooded in 1920 to create a lake. By the time the dinner was served, the guest of honor had left. So the past perfect tense is needed because the action of leaving was already completed at a specific time when the dinner was served. Some writers tend to overuse the past perfect tense. Do not use the past perfect if two past events happened at the same time. When Ernest Hemingway lived in Cuba, he wrote, "For whom the bell tolls." And so, sequence of tenses with infinitives and participles. An infinitive is the base form of a verb preceded by to. Use present infinitive to show action at the same time as or later than the action of the verb in the sentence. Sonia had hoped to pay the bill by May 1st. Use the perfect form of an infinitive for an action occurring earlier than that of the other verb. Dan would have liked to have joined the Navy, but he went to college first. Like the tense of an infinitive, the tense of a participle is governed by the tense of the sentence's verb. Use the present participle, ing, for an action occurring at the same time as that of the sentence verb. Hiking the Appalachian Trail, we spotted many wildflowers. Use the past participle such as given or helped, or the present perfect participle having plus the past participle for an action occurring before that of the verb. Discovered off the coast of Florida, the Spanish galleon yielded many treasures. Having worked her way through college, Lee graduated debt-free. There are 3 moods in English: the indicative, used for facts, opinions, and questions; the imperative, used for orders or advice; and the subjunctive, used in certain contexts to express wishes, requests, or conditions contrary to fact. So when we use this subjunctive, we want to wish. We're wishing for something. We're doing something emotional. So in the subjunctive mood, present tense verbs do not change form to indicate the number and person of the subject. Instead, the subjunctive uses the base form of the verb with all subjects. It is important that you be prepared for the interview. We ask that she drive more slowly. Also, in the subjunctive mode, there is only one past tense, were. If I were you, I'd try a new strategy. The subjunctive mode appears only in a few contexts, in contrary to fact clauses beginning with if or expressing a wish, in that clauses following words such as ask, insist, recommend, request, and suggest, and in certain set expressions. In contrary to fact beginning with if, when a subordinate clause beginning with if expresses a condition that's contrary to fact, use the subjunctive were in place of was. If I were a member of the management team, I would organize more social events for employees. The astronomers would be able to see the moons of Jupiter tonight if the weather were clearer. The verbs in these sentences express conditions that do not exist. The writer is not a member of Congress, and the weather is not clear. So if you have a hypothetical, if I were a bird, I would fly away. That's an example of a subjunctive, something that's not true. If I were a man, I would wear a tuxedo, that sort of thing. So you would use were when it's something that's contrary to fact. In contrary to fact clauses expressing a wish. In formal English, use the subjunctive were in clauses expressing a wish or desire. I wish that Dr. Vaughn was my professor. I wish that Dr. Vaughn were my professor. In that clauses following verbs such as ask, insist, request, and suggest. Because requests have not yet become reality, they are expressed in the subjunctive mode. Professor Moore insists that her students be on time for every class. We recommend that Mrs. Lambert file Form 1050 as soon as possible. In certain set expressions, the subjunctive mode once more is widely used. Be that as it may, be that as it were, be it from me, and so on. So, and then for ESL students, there's even more challenges for verbs. And so a base form of the verb, help, and then past tense, helped, past participle, helped, present participle, helping, and helps. Irregular, give, gave, given, giving, gives. So verbs, tenses commonly used in the active voice. So in the simple present, so we use the simple present when we want to discuss general facts, states of being, habitual or repetitive actions, scheduled future events. So we use the simple present for General facts. College students often study late at night. States of being. Water becomes steam at 100 degrees centigrade. Habitual facts or actions. We donate to a different charity each year. Schedule future events. The train arrives tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Then we use the simple past when it's a completed action at a specific time in the past. The storm destroyed their property, or a specific time that she drove to Montana 3 years ago. Or you use the simple past for states of being in the past. When I was young, I usually walked to school with my father. And then in the simple future, it is just future actions, promises, or predictions. Tomorrow I will exercise. The snowfall will begin around midnight. And then present progressive is when you have things happening right now and not completed. So actions in progress. So present progressive, actions in progress at the present time and not continuing indefinitely. So the students are taking an exam in room 105. The valet is parking her car. I am leaving tomorrow morning. And then you have past progressive. So that's future, that's actions in progress at a specific time in the past. They were swimming when the storm struck. Then you have were going to for past plans that did not happen. We were going to drive to Florida for spring break, but the car broke down. Some verbs are not normally used in the progressive tense. Appear, believe, belong, contain, have, hear, know, like, need, see them, seem, taste, understand, and want. Present perfect. Repetitive or constant action that began in the past and continues to the present. I have loved cats since I was a child. That means I loved cats when I was a child and I still love cats today. So that's the present perfect. When you have plus the past participle. Alicia has worked in Kenya for 10 years. Actions that happen at an unknown or unspecified past time. Stephen has visited Wales 3 times. Past perfect. Actions that began or occurred before another time in the past. She had just crossed the street when the runway car crashed into the building. So when you have a past perfect, that's one past action happening before another past action. Present perfect progressive. Continuous actions that began in the past and continue to the present. Yolanda has been trying to get a job in Boston for 5 years. Past perfect progressive. Actions that began and continued in the past until another past action occurred. By the time I moved to Georgia, I had been supporting myself for 5 years. So I've already gone over past tense and simple past. And then these are all of the passive voice. So when you have passive voice, that is when the subject is receiving the action. And when you have active voice, that's when the subject is doing the action. When you have passive voice, you have be plus a past participle. So Dreaming in Cuban was written by Cristina Garcia. The child is being tested. So these are examples of passive voice. And then there are many different tenses for passive voice in which the subject receives the action. So breakfast is served daily. He was rewarded for being on time. The decision will be made by the committee next week. So for general facts, habitual repetitive actions, simple past, simple present. Then simple past is completed past actions. He was rewarded for being on time. Simple future. Future actions, promises, or predictions. So passive voice can also have a simple future tense. So the decision will be made by the committee next week. And then present progressive in passive voice. Actions in progress at the present time. The new stadium is being built with private money. Future actions in present progressive passive voice. Joe is being promoted to a new job next month. Past progressive in passive voice. We thought we were being followed. Present progressive in passive voice. The flight has been delayed because of the storms in the Midwest. Wars have just been fought throughout history. Wars have been fought throughout history. Past perfect passive voice. He had been given all the hints he needed to complete the puzzle. Future progressive, future perfect, and perfect progressive forms are not used in the passive voice. And I believe that's it until I hit modals. Okay, so modals is when you're not sure of something. I would say, let's say I'm not sure what I'm going to do for next weekend. So I could say I might go swimming. I may ask my friend out to the restaurant. I could go bowling. And so at the very end, modals are like helping verbs that tell you at what point the person is certain that something is going to happen. And it expresses doubt. It helps the reader see how much doubt the writer or the person has or the speaker has. If I have a lot of doubt, then I use my modals like may, might, could, maybe. And then if I'm really certain something's going to happen, I would use modals like must, will. In other words, something definitely is going to happen. I definitely, for next weekend, I definitely know what I'm going to do next weekend. I must clean that dirty car. I am supposed to see my boss and work during the weekend. So when you're totally sure what you're going to do during the weekend, you use things like must and will. When you're unsure of what you're going to do during the weekend, you would say, I might go see a friend. I may do this. And then if you're just so what you're going to do next weekend, you go, well, I could go swimming. I could. So could and would and should are in the smack in the middle. So very, very, very doubtful, may and might. So doubtful, could, would, should. And absolutely certain of what you're going to do during the weekend would be something like will and must. And all of these are known as modal helping verbs. And it shows to the reader, and it also shows politeness. So if I wanted to ask somebody, might I borrow your pen? That's the most polite. May I borrow your pen? So you want to show politeness. Then, so that's very, very, very polite. Then medium polite would be like, could I borrow your pen? And then not so polite would be, okay, I'm going to go take your pen, or something like that. Or will I take your? In other words, as you get further down, it becomes rude. So and I heard that it's British English. Might I borrow your pen? Which is very British English to my ears. Is the most polite way to ask somebody, for a pen. And usually native speakers of English can intuitively tell the difference between may, might, could, should, would, must, and will. Because for a native speaker of English, if you say, I will do something, or I might do something, a native speaker of English knows right away it means a degree of doubt or you know what you're doing. But for a ESL student, they all sound the same. So that's why for an ESL student, you have to be taught that may, might is different than could and should, which is different from must and will. So modals are a very ESL-ish, because as an ESL student, you don't have that native speaker intuition. So the modal, you use the base form of the verb after a modal. The modal verbs are can, could, may, might, must, shall, should, will, and would, and ought to. I didn't name all of them, but you get the idea. So the modals are used with the base form of a verb to show ability, certainty, necessity, permission, obligation, or possibility. In other words, doubt. Modals and verbs that follow them do not change form. So that means that I can run, I can speak. So I can't say I can speaking, and you cannot say I cannot speak. You always use the infinitive form or the base form of the verb, to speak, to run. So I might run, I could speak. So I'm always using the base form of the verb. And that is a typical ESL mistake. And so here, general ability. I can, ants can survive anywhere. So that's general ability. Informal, these are the things in which modals are used. So I can speak English, I can speak Chinese, a little bit. I cannot read and write Chinese. And then informal request or permission. Can you tell me where the light is? Sandy can borrow my calculator. Could. General ability. So the past tense of can is could. Leah could read when she was only 3 years old. Could you give me the pen? So that's very polite. Although might I borrow a pen is more polite than could I borrow a pen. And for native speakers, we can hear the difference. But ESL speakers have to learn that difference, because that's the problem with learning another language, is you don't know all the nuances. That's why for ESL students, the last thing that you learn, humor. You always don't get the jokes. You're always the last ones in the theater to laugh. Everyone else has already laughed, and you're like, oh, that's what the joke is. And then you laugh, and you're the last person laughing, and everybody stares at you. Yeah, so that's what it is. It's difficult in other languages, the nuances. Formal request or permission. May I see the report? Possibility. I may try to finish my homework tonight. Possibility. Funding for the language lab might double next year. Necessity for the future. To be an effective welfare to work program must provide access to job training. Strong probability. Amy must be nervous. Near certainty. I must have left my wallet at home. Suggestions or advice. Diabetics should drink plenty of water every day. Obligations. The government should protect citizens' rights. Expectations. The books should arrive soon. Certainty. If you don't leave now, you will be late for your rehearsal. Requests. Will you help me study for my psychology exam? Promises and offers. Jonah will arrange the carpool. Polite requests. Would you help me carry these books? I would like some coffee. Habitual or repeated actions. Whenever Elena needed help with sewing, she would call her aunt. So those are the different ways in which you can use modals. So therein, I'm going to stop this video on verb tenses and modals. And if you have any questions about verb tenses and modals, which is really hard for students of English, feel free to email me anytime.